Sky, this message is more important than it first appears. Before you dismiss it as just another video, pause for a moment and listen carefully. Sky. What you're about to hear isn't about fear or sensational claims. It is about perspective and understanding something that may completely change how you see your own journey. Sky. Most people will scroll past without giving these words a second thought. They are busy, distracted, exhausted, or convinced they'll come back later. But something caused you to stop here, Sky, and that matters. Because sometimes the moments that quietly interrupt our routine become the ones that leave the deepest impact. You may think that victory always looks obvious. You picture applause, celebration, Sky, recognition, or a dramatic ending that tells everyone the battle is over. Yet the greatest victories in life rarely arrive that way. They happen in silence, hidden beneath ordinary days. Sky, unnoticed by almost everyone except the person who lived through them. What if the greatest victory you've ever experienced wasn't something the world could see? Sky. What if it happened in the quiet moments when no one was watching, when every choice to keep going cost more than anyone around you realized? Those victories rarely receive recognition, Sky, but they often become the foundation for everything that follows. This message asks you not to rush past that truth. Not because anyone wants to control your attention, but because understanding can easily be ignored. When truth is ignored, confusion often takes its place, Sky, and people spend years searching for answers they once briefly encountered, but never stopped long enough to understand. Sky. Only a small number of people ever pause long enough to reflect on why they survived difficult seasons. That doesn't make them better than anyone else, Sky. It simply means they are willing to look deeper instead of immediately returning to the constant noise and distractions that fill everyday life. Sky. Many people move from one challenge straight into the next without ever asking what the previous struggle was trying to teach them. Reflection feels uncomfortable because it demands honesty. Sky. It asks questions that cannot be answered with quick distractions. And many people would rather stay busy than face those questions. Yet you stayed. Perhaps you cannot fully explain why, Sky, but something inside you recognized that this moment deserved your attention. Sometimes our hearts recognize significance long before our minds can put it into words, Sky. And that quiet awareness often becomes the beginning of real understanding. There is a reason your past has felt heavier than you expected. Maybe you've called it survival. Maybe you've described it as luck, determination, or simply doing what had to be done. Those explanations may contain part of the truth, but they may not tell the entire story. While you were living through those difficult seasons, you couldn't see the whole picture. You only experienced the pressure, the exhaustion, the uncertainty, and the emotional weight that seemed to follow you from one day to the next, Sky. What you couldn't see were the countless moments where circumstances could have unfolded very differently. There were situations that felt impossible, decisions that carried enormous pressure, and days when continuing forward required more strength than you thought you possessed. Looking back now, you may realize you came closer to losing hope than you ever admitted, even to yourself, Sky. There were evenings when your heart felt heavier than anyone knew. There were thoughts you kept private because you believed no one would truly understand, Sky. There were mornings when your only goal was to make it through one more day, believing that somehow tomorrow might become a little easier. You may have convinced yourself that everyone feels that way, Sky. Perhaps you assumed your struggle was ordinary because you had grown so familiar with carrying it. Some seasons shape people in ways they don't fully recognize until much later, after enough time has passed to see the journey more clearly. Despite everything, you are still here. That simple fact deserves more attention than most people ever give it, Sky. You remained present when disappearing emotionally would have felt easier. You continued choosing integrity when compromise promised immediate comfort, and you refused to allow disappointment to permanently reshape your character. Those decisions were never dramatic. Nobody applauded them. They did not become headlines or milestones that others celebrated. Yet they quietly determined the direction of your future. Real victory often looks exactly like that. It looks like refusing to let bitterness settle into your heart after repeated disappointment. It looks like choosing honesty when pretending would have been easier. It looks like remaining compassionate in situations that constantly tempted you to become cold, guarded, or indifferent toward others. Most people never recognize those moments as victories because they measure success by visible achievements. They celebrate accomplishments while overlooking preservation. Yet sometimes the greatest success isn't gaining something new. It's refusing to lose the person you were created to become. That is why reflection matters. Without stopping to understand what you've already overcome, it becomes easy to carry yesterday's fears into tomorrow's opportunities. Old doubts begin shaping new decisions. And past pain starts defining a future that was never meant to be controlled by it. Clarity changes direction. Without it, every new challenge looks like another battle for survival. Every obstacle feels like proof that nothing has changed. Every delay appears to confirm your worst fears, even when the season itself has already shifted. What if the struggle you believed was still controlling your life has already begun to lose its power? What if you've been preparing for another fight when, in reality, you've already survived the one that threatened to define you? That possibility changes everything. Looking back, there may have been moments when events slowed unexpectedly. Plans collapsed without explanation. Doors closed that you desperately wanted to walk through, and opportunities disappeared just as they seemed within reach. At the time, those interruptions probably felt like failures or painful disappointments. But protection rarely announces itself while it is happening. Sometimes it simply redirects a path before danger becomes visible. Sometimes it delays an answer until the timing is safer. Sometimes it leaves you wondering why everything changed, only for understanding to arrive much later. You may never know how many difficult outcomes you were spared from. You may never see every path that quietly disappeared before you reached it. Yet the story you are living today is evidence that your journey continued, even through seasons that seemed determined to stop it. That truth deserves more than a passing thought, because once you truly understand that surviving wasn't merely about getting through another difficult season, you begin walking differently. You stop minimizing what you've overcome, stop treating your endurance as something ordinary, and begin recognizing that every quiet victory has shaped the person you are becoming. And before you take another step into what comes next, there's something even more important you need to understand about the battles you never realized you were fighting. There were moments when you believed you had simply been fortunate. You told yourself you were strong enough, careful enough, or resilient enough to make it through. But what if your survival was about far more than personal determination? What if there were unseen moments of protection that quietly altered the course of your life before you ever realized they had happened? Think about the roads you never traveled, the decisions that were unexpectedly delayed, and the opportunities that disappeared just when they seemed certain. At the time, those experiences probably felt frustrating or even unfair. Looking back now, however, they may have been the very interruptions that kept you from stepping into circumstances that would have demanded more than you were prepared to carry. Protection rarely arrives with an announcement. It often feels like disappointment while it is happening, only revealing its purpose after enough time has passed to see the bigger picture. What once seemed like a closed door may actually have been a boundary placed where you could not yet see the danger waiting beyond it. There were seasons when emotional exhaustion became your constant companion. Sky. You learned how to keep functioning while carrying burdens no one else fully understood. Outwardly, you continued meeting responsibilities. Sky. Yet inwardly, you often wondered how much longer you could keep holding everything together. You didn't always tell people how difficult those days really were. Instead, Sky, you convinced yourself that staying quiet was easier than trying to explain emotions that even you struggled to understand. You kept moving forward, hoping that eventually the weight would become lighter. Sky, even if you couldn't imagine when that day would come, there were nights when your thoughts refused to slow down. Rest felt distant, and peace seemed just beyond reach. Sky. Then there were mornings when you woke already exhausted, carrying yesterday's weight into another day before it had even begun. From the outside, those moments may have looked ordinary. Sky. Yet internally, they were battles that demanded extraordinary endurance. They were not always dramatic crises, but quiet struggles that gradually tested your hope, your confidence, and your sense of purpose. Some challenges arrived through constant pressure rather than sudden events. Others came through loneliness, misunderstanding, or the feeling that you were carrying far more than anyone around you realized. Those experiences slowly chipped away at your confidence, making it tempting to question whether your efforts truly mattered. The greatest battles are not always the loudest ones. Sky. Sometimes they unfold silently through discouragement, through unanswered questions, and through the gradual temptation to believe that your presence in the world makes little difference. Left unchallenged, those thoughts can quietly reshape the way a person sees both themselves and their future. There were also paths that looked promising at first glance. Certain relationships, opportunities, or decisions appeared attractive, yet they carried consequences you could not fully see at the time. Had everything unfolded exactly as you expected, your life might have followed a far more painful direction. Instead, some of those plans unexpectedly changed. Certain relationships ended before they reached the future you imagined. Some opportunities disappeared, while others were delayed long enough for your perspective to change. At the time, those interruptions felt like losses, but they may have prevented even greater heartache later. Sometimes protection feels like delay. Sometimes it feels like rejection. Sometimes it arrives disguised as an inconvenience that interrupts your carefully planned future. Yet not every closed door represents failure. Occasionally it represents mercy that can only be understood with hindsight. You also became skilled at surviving quietly. You learned how to smile while hurting. How to complete your responsibilities while carrying invisible burdens, and how to appear composed even when your inner world felt fragile. Those abilities helped you endure difficult seasons, but they also hid just how close you sometimes came to reaching your emotional limit. There were moments when slowing down felt frustrating. Plans stalled without explanation, momentum disappeared, and progress seemed to stop entirely. You questioned whether you had done something wrong, wondering why every step forward seemed followed by another unexpected delay. Yet what felt like failure may actually have been protection working in ways you could not recognize at the time. Moving faster might have placed you in situations that required more than you were ready to handle. Being slowed down may have preserved your strength for the journey that still lay ahead. That changes the way you see your story. Instead of viewing every interruption as evidence that life was working against you, you begin considering the possibility that some interruptions were quietly working for you. What appeared to be an obstacle may actually have been a safeguard placed along your path. This understanding also changes how you think about your survival. It was never simply about enduring difficult circumstances until they ended. Sky. It was about being preserved through those circumstances, without allowing them to completely redefine who you became. You were never expected to emerge from hardship untouched. Pain leaves its mark, and difficult seasons change every person who walks through them. But there is a difference between being changed by suffering and being consumed by it. Despite everything you experienced, compassion remained part of your character. Your capacity to care about others survived seasons that could easily have made you cynical. Your willingness to keep hoping remained alive even when disappointment repeatedly tested it. That alone is remarkable. Many people measure victory by visible success. But some of life's greatest victories happen entirely within the heart. They appear in the decision to remain kind after being hurt, to remain honest after being disappointed, and to remain hopeful when circumstances provide very little reason to expect change. Now that you've reached this point, you cannot continue treating your survival as something insignificant. Every difficult season has added depth to your character, wisdom to your perspective, and resilience to your journey. Those experiences were never meant to become reasons for fear. Instead, they can become reminders of how much you have already overcome. As you move forward, the goal is not to live under constant pressure or anxiety. The goal is awareness. Awareness helps you recognize unhealthy patterns before they take root again. It encourages you to value your own well-being, to protect your peace, and to honor the lessons that difficult seasons have already taught you. Because the story isn't only about surviving what happened in your past. It is also about understanding why those experiences matter as you step into the future. And before you fully grasp that purpose, you first need to recognize another truth. The greatest battle you faced was one you didn't even realize you were fighting. You imagined battles as something obvious. Moments filled with visible conflict, unmistakable danger, and clear endings. But the greatest struggle you faced never announced itself that way. It unfolded quietly, weaving itself into ordinary days through exhaustion, uncertainty, and thoughts that slowly tried to reshape the way you saw yourself. At first, you believed you were simply tired. You assumed the constant pressure was just another part of life. Something everyone carried in one way or another. Yet beneath the surface, a deeper conflict was taking place. One that wasn't trying to defeat you all at once, but to gradually wear down your confidence, your hope, and your sense of purpose. The battle began with questions rather than answers. It whispered doubts about your value, your future, and whether your efforts truly mattered. Those questions seemed harmless at first, but left unanswered, they slowly tried to become conclusions, convincing you that you were falling behind while everyone else was moving ahead. Comparison became one of the quietest weapons in that struggle. You looked around and saw people reaching milestones that seemed farther away from you. Their lives appeared clearer, their paths smoother, and their progress faster, leaving you wondering whether you had somehow missed the direction your own life was supposed to take. Those moments tempted you to measure your worth against someone else's journey. They encouraged you to believe that your value depended on how quickly you succeeded rather than on who you were becoming. Yet, despite those thoughts, you never completely surrendered to them. Instead, something within you continued resisting. Even when you questioned yourself, you refused to let comparison define your identity. That quiet resistance mattered more than you realized, because every time you chose not to believe those lies completely, you preserved a part of yourself that was worth protecting. Hope also came under constant pressure. Not through dramatic disasters, but through long seasons of waiting, unanswered prayers, and expectations that seemed endlessly postponed. Every delay tested your willingness to believe that something better was still possible. There were moments when it felt easier to lower your expectations than to risk another disappointment. Guy. You considered protecting your heart by expecting less from life, convincing yourself that hope only led to frustration. Yet even then, a small part of you continued believing that your story was not finished. That quiet persistence became its own form of victory. Faith faced similar challenges. Not simply belief expressed through words, but trust maintained during seasons when answers remained hidden. Silence often became the greatest test because it tempted you to mistake waiting for abandonment. You wondered why clarity seemed so distant. You questioned whether continuing to trust made sense when every answer appeared delayed. Those questions did not mean your faith had disappeared. They became the very place where it matured. Moving beyond easy confidence into something steadier and far more resilient, another battle unfolded through weariness. It did not attempt to destroy you overnight. Instead, it tried to exhaust you little by little until continuing forward seemed pointless. Weariness has a unique way of making surrender appear reasonable. Convincing people that the easiest solution is simply to stop caring. You felt that exhaustion more deeply than most people ever knew. There were days when showing up required extraordinary effort. Even though nothing about those days appeared extraordinary to anyone watching. You kept fulfilling responsibilities while quietly carrying burdens that few could see. Still, you remained present. You continued taking one step after another even when motivation disappeared. You continued choosing honesty instead of pretending everything was perfect. You continued showing kindness when disappointment could easily have justified becoming bitter. Those choices may have looked ordinary, but they revealed extraordinary strength. Victory did not arrive through applause or recognition. It appeared in the decision to wake up one more morning, to keep trying one more time, and to refuse becoming someone your struggles were trying to create. Looking back now, those quiet decisions reveal just how much you were overcoming without fully realizing it. There were also moments when emotional numbness settled over your life. Joy felt distant. Excitement became difficult to find, and everything seemed muted compared to the way it once had. You wondered whether something inside you had permanently changed. Sometimes numbness develops because the heart is protecting itself after carrying too much for too long. It creates distance from overwhelming emotions simply to keep moving forward. Yet staying there indefinitely can slowly disconnect a person from life itself. You did not remain trapped in that place. Instead of accepting numbness as your permanent reality, you questioned it. You searched for understanding instead of burying yourself in endless distractions. That willingness to remain aware prevented temporary emotional exhaustion from becoming your permanent identity. Patience became another battlefield. You wanted answers. You wanted timelines. You wanted to know when circumstances would finally improve and when the waiting would end. Every unanswered question stretched your patience beyond what felt comfortable, forcing you to keep moving without seeing the entire path ahead. Yet patience is never passive. Real patience is active endurance. It is the quiet decision to continue walking faithfully even when certainty remains out of reach. That kind of endurance shapes character in ways instant success never could. Your understanding of strength also changed. At one time, you may have believed strength meant never struggling, never feeling afraid, and never needing support. Life gradually taught you something much deeper. True strength includes admitting weakness without surrendering to it. It allows honesty without hopelessness and perseverance without pretending everything is easy. There were moments when fear was real. Uncertainty felt overwhelming, and confidence seemed difficult to find. Yet courage was never about eliminating fear. It was about refusing to let fear become the voice that directed your life. Sky. That distinction changed everything. Each time you stayed engaged with your responsibilities instead of withdrawing completely, you won another quiet battle. Every choice to remain present, even while carrying uncertainty, became evidence that your circumstances had not taken ownership of your future. Looking back now, it becomes clear that your greatest victories were not measured by accomplishments alone. They were measured by the person you refused to stop becoming. You remained compassionate instead of cynical. You remained honest instead of pretending. You remained open instead of allowing disappointment to permanently close your heart. You were wounded, certainly. You grew tired more times than you can count. But you were never destroyed. Now you can begin seeing your past through a different lens. What once appeared to be nothing more than survival was actually evidence of remarkable endurance. The battle that seemed invisible left behind quiet victories that continue shaping your life even today. And understanding those victories prepares you for the next chapter. Because the greatest lesson isn't simply that you survived. It's discovering why your survival still carries purpose as you move forward. Your survival was never just about making it through difficult moments. It was about what those moments produced inside you. The challenges you faced shaped your understanding, strengthened your character, and revealed parts of yourself that may have remained hidden if life had always been easy. For a long time, you may have focused only on what the difficult seasons took from you. You remembered the stress, the disappointment, the uncertainty, and the moments when you felt like you had reached your limit. But there is another side to that story. The person you became because you continued moving forward despite everything you faced. Hard seasons have a way of exposing what truly matters. They remove distractions and force you to recognize what remains when comfort disappears. When everything feels uncertain, the choices you make reveal the values that exist deeper than circumstances. You learned that survival is not simply about lasting longer than a difficult situation. True survival is about protecting the most important parts of yourself while walking through that situation. It is about keeping your compassion, your honesty, and your ability to hope even when circumstances try to take those things away. Many people come through painful experiences and allow those experiences to completely change who they are. They become controlled by anger, disappointment, or resentment. They begin seeing the world only through the pain they experienced, allowing their wounds to define their identity. But your story did not end there. You experienced difficulty, but you did not allow difficulty to become your entire identity. You carried scars, but you did not become the scars. You faced disappointment, but you did not allow disappointment to convince you that nothing good could ever happen again. That difference matters. The person who walks through hardship and remains kind has achieved something powerful. The person who experiences rejection and still chooses integrity has won something valuable. The person who faces uncertainty and continues believing that life has meaning has discovered a strength that cannot be measured by external achievements. This is why you should stop minimizing your journey. Sometimes people dismiss their own struggles because they compare them to someone else's pain. They tell themselves that others had it worse, so their own experience does not matter. But pain does not need comparison to be real. Every person carries battles that are unique to their own journey. What you experienced shaped you because it mattered. The nights you endured, the decisions you questioned, the moments you felt alone, and the days you had to push forward without clear answers all became part of your story. They created depth that cannot be gained through comfort alone. There is a difference between simply existing and truly understanding your life. Many people move from one season to another without ever reflecting on what those seasons changed within them. Guy. They continue repeating old patterns because they never stop long enough to understand the lessons hidden inside their experiences. Awareness breaks that cycle. When you understand what you survived, Guy, you begin making different choices. You recognize the situations that drain you, the patterns that once harmed you, and the environments that no longer match the person you are becoming. Guy. You stop running back to what once felt familiar, simply because it feels comfortable. Comfort is not always the same as safety. Familiarity is not always the same as purpose. Guy. Sometimes growth requires leaving behind things that once felt normal, but were quietly preventing you from moving forward. Your past is not meant to trap you. It is meant to teach you. Guy. Every lesson gained through difficulty becomes a form of wisdom. Every challenge you overcame becomes evidence that you are capable of handling more than you once believed. Guy. Every moment you thought would break you, but didn't, becomes a reminder that your story is stronger than your circumstances. However, understanding your survival does not mean living in fear of losing it. Guy. You are not meant to spend every day expecting another crisis. You are not meant to constantly look behind you, waiting for the next struggle to appear. You are meant to move forward with awareness. Guy. There is a difference between being cautious and being controlled by fear. Caution helps you make wise decisions. Fear keeps you trapped in the past. The goal is not to forget what happened, Guy, but allow what happened to make you wiser rather than more afraid. The same experiences that once made you question yourself can now become sources of confidence. Not because everything will always be easy, Guy, but because you already know you can endure difficult moments without losing who you are. That knowledge changes the way you approach the future. Guy, you no longer have to see yourself as someone who is barely surviving. You can begin seeing yourself as someone who has already overcome things that once seemed impossible. Guy, you can recognize that your strength was not created by comfort. It was developed through perseverance. The future will still bring challenges. Every life contains uncertainty, unexpected changes, Guy, and moments that require patience. But you are not entering those moments as the same person you were before. You are carrying experience. You are carrying wisdom, Guy. You are carrying proof that difficult seasons do not have the final word. The most important change is not always what happens around you. Often, the greatest transformation happens within you, Guy. The way you see yourself determines the way you respond to everything else. When you believe your life has value, you make different choices. When you recognize your own growth, Guy, you stop accepting situations that constantly pull you backward. When you understand that your survival had meaning, you begin treating your future with greater care. Guy, this is the responsibility that comes after endurance. Not pressure. Not the need to prove yourself to everyone around you. Instead, it is the responsibility to honor the person you fought to become. Guy, you do that by living honestly, by protecting your peace, by choosing relationships and environments that support growth instead of returning to patterns that once caused harm. Guy, your victory was never about becoming perfect. It was about becoming aware. It was about recognizing that you can experience difficulty without being defined by it. It was about understanding that pain can be part of your story without becoming the author of your story. The battle changed you, but it did not defeat you. And now that you understand what you have already overcome, you can finally begin walking into the future with a different perspective. Not as someone waiting for life to finally begin, but as someone who has already been transformed through the journey. Because the greatest proof of victory is not that you never struggled. The greatest proof is that after everything you experienced, Sky, you are still here, still learning, still growing, Sky, and still capable of moving forward. The greatest realization comes when you finally understand that your story was never defined by the moments that tried to break you. Those moments were chapters, Sky, not the entire book. They were experiences that shaped you, but they were never meant to become the limits of what your life could become. For too long, Sky, you may have viewed yourself through the lens of what went wrong. You remembered the losses, the disappointments, the delays, and the struggles that made you question your own strength, Sky. But there is another way to see your journey, not as a record of everything you endured, but as evidence of everything you overcame. You are not only the person who experienced difficult seasons, Sky. You are also the person who continued walking through them. You are the person who kept choosing growth when giving up seemed easier, Sky. You are the person who remained open to hope even when circumstances repeatedly challenged that hope. That is something worth recognizing, Sky. Many people spend their lives waiting for a perfect moment when everything finally feels complete. They believe victory will arrive when every problem disappears, when every question has an answer, Sky, and when every obstacle has been removed. But life rarely works that way. Sometimes victory arrives before circumstances change, Sky. Sometimes victory is found in the transformation that happens inside you while the circumstances are still difficult. It is found in the patience you develop, the wisdom you gain, Sky, and the understanding that you are stronger than the situations you once feared. You learned lessons that comfort could never teach you. You learned the importance of patience when answers did not come quickly, Sky. You learned the value of peace when chaos surrounded you. You learned the power of staying true to yourself when pressure encouraged you to become someone else. Those lessons are now part of you, Sky. The person you are today carries knowledge that only experience could provide. You recognize things you once ignored. You understand patterns you once repeated. You notice warning signs you once overlooked, Sky. This awareness is not something to fear. It is something to appreciate, because awareness allows you to move differently. You no longer have to return to situations simply because they are familiar, Sky. You no longer have to accept every opportunity simply because it appears available. You no longer have to sacrifice your peace just to prove your strength, Sky. You have learned that strength is not measured by how much you can tolerate. Real strength is knowing what deserves your energy and what does not. It is understanding when to continue and when to step away, Sky. It is recognizing when patience is needed and when change is necessary. It is respecting yourself enough to protect the life you have worked so hard to rebuild. The journey ahead will not be without challenges, Sky. Difficult moments are still part of life. Unexpected situations will still appear. Questions will still come without immediate answers. But you are different now, Sky. You are not walking into the future carrying only fear from the past. You are carrying experience. You are carrying resilience, Sky. You are carrying the knowledge that you have already survived, moments you once believed you could not survive. That knowledge changes everything. When another difficult season arrives, Sky, you will not face it from the same place of uncertainty. You will remember that storms do not last forever. You will remember that difficult chapters can produce growth, Sky. You will remember that your identity is bigger than any temporary struggle. You will understand that one painful moment does not have the power to define your entire life, Sky. The purpose of remembering what you survived is not to remain stuck in the past. It is to recognize the strength that was built there and use it to create a healthier future. Your past should become a teacher, Sky, not a prison. It should give you wisdom, not fear. It should remind you of your ability to overcome, not convince you that more hardship is waiting around every corner, Sky. The most important thing you can carry forward is not the pain itself. It is the understanding that the pain did not win. You are still capable of love, You are still capable of hope, Sky. You are still capable of building, creating, and moving forward. Those things survived even after disappointment. You remained capable of caring. Even after uncertainty, you remained capable of believing. Even after difficult experiences, you remained connected to the person you wanted to become. That is a victory many people overlook. A person can lose opportunities and still rebuild. Sky. A person can experience setbacks and still move forward. A person can face difficult seasons and still discover a stronger version of themselves waiting on the other side. Your journey proves that, Sky. So do not walk forward as someone who barely escaped the past. Walk forward as someone who has learned from it. Do not see yourself as someone who was only protected from failure. Sky. See yourself as someone who gained wisdom through every challenge. Do not underestimate the person you have become. The battles you faced taught you endurance. The waiting taught you patience. Sky. The uncertainty taught you trust. The difficult moments taught you what truly matters. Now the responsibility is simple. Honor what you have learned. Choose what brings growth instead of what brings destruction. Choose honesty instead of pretending. Choose peace instead of constantly returning to chaos. The future deserves a version of you that understands your own value. You do not need to prove your worth through constant struggle. You do not need to earn the right to exist through achievement. Your value was never determined by how much pain you could survive. Your value is found in the person you continue choosing to become. The story is not over. The same person who survived yesterday's challenges can build tomorrow's opportunities. The same heart that endured disappointment can experience joy again. The same mind that once carried confusion can find clarity. You won because you remained. You won because you continued. You won because, despite everything that tried to change you, you did not lose the most important parts of yourself. And now you can move forward, not with fear of what might happen, but with confidence in what you have already overcome. Because the greatest evidence of victory is not a perfect life. It is a life that has been tested, challenged, and stretched, and still chooses to move forward with hope. You are still here, and that means your story is still being written.